It's mayhem on Britain's roads. Dangerous drivers claim 10 lives every day. But does their punishment fit the crime?
60 for a parking ticket, £50 for a life. Where is justice?
Tonight, we ask, are careless drivers getting away with murder?
He said, I've done it this time, I've killed someone else.
In 1992, the government promised to get tough with dangerous drivers. A new offence was introduced. The idea was to put irresponsible motorists behind bars. It failed. Today, most motorists who kill don't even lose their licenses, let alone their liberty.
There seems to be almost a conspiracy, almost a denial that death and injury occurs on the roads. And when the government talks about being tough on crime, you know that they're talking about drugs, public disorder, youth crime, anything but traffic crime.
We're not playing a game here. We have to get away from the idea that it's good luck if you actually get through a red light or if you don't get caught speeding. We're not playing a game. We have to get serious as an organisation.
Every year, 3,500 people die on our roads. But only 1/10 of the drivers responsible face the serious charge of causing death through dangerous driving. Now there's a growing campaign that says motorists should be held responsible for their actions, and that careless drivers should no longer have a license to kill. It's a parent's worst nightmare. Your child is knocked down and killed by a car. The motorist responsible admits breaking the law, yet he drives away from court with nothing more than a small fine. It shouldn't happen, but it does.
He was always fishing with his brother. He was very bright academically. He always got very good school results. And I think a lot of it was to do with the fact that he had such a sort of keen interest in life.
William Blacklock became known to millions, but for all the wrong reasons. He was knocked down and killed by a speeding motorist. His parents allowed their treasured holiday videos to be used as part of a government Kill Your Speed campaign.
By the officer, without the use of jargon.
We didn't want other parents to go through what we've been through. And also, it is a testimony to William's life. He'll never be forgotten.
You may have seen my son William in the Kill Your Speed TV commercial. He is the one waving at the camera while on his holidays.
Part of the pain is really to do with the fact that you will never know what he would look like, never know what he would do, what his school achievements would be. You're always guessing.
William would have been crossing from this side of the road onto the zebra, and actually a person had stopped on the opposite side of the road seeing William crossing the road. Unfortunately, the car approaching from the Northampton direction just didn't see him. William stepped out onto the crossing and was struck by the car.
You still think about it every day. It never goes away. The vivid memory of seeing William on a trolley, as if he was alive but sleeping, will haunt me till the day I die.
There is plenty of warning back down the road that this is a 30 zone. The accident investigator judged that the driver was doing no more than 44 miles an hour. It was very difficult for him because there were no physical signs on the road, no skid marks if you like. It was simply a case that the driver did not see William on the crossing and therefore took no evasive action, no braking at all.
By his own admission, three independent witnesses, he was doing in excess of the speed limit, That was tantamount, as far as I was concerned, to dangerous driving.
But in court, the magistrates took a different view. The death through dangerous driving charge was thrown out, and the man who killed William faced the lesser charge of careless driving. For that, he was fined £150.
Having killed my son on a zebra crossing, no insurance, and he wasn't even banned. So I felt very angry about that.
Britain is unique in bringing a charge which is a mere traffic offence when someone has been killed on the road. In no other European country or beyond is death on the road treated as casually and shabbily.
Britain has 2 levels of driving offence. Careless driving is defined as driving below a normal standard and carries a fine of up to £2,500.
Oh, yes, well, that's good enough evidence. That's good enough evidence.
Dangerous driving is classed as driving far below a normal standard and carries up to 5 years in prison, 10 if the driver is responsible for a death.
Some things are obviously well below and some things are obviously just below, but you get to a position where you could argue one way or the other, and obviously drawing the dividing line there is by necessity arbitrary.
With careless driving, the consequences of the driver's action are not allowed to be taken into account. That means ignoring that a life has been lost.
It is treated as if they had driven into a bollard or didn't have the lights on the car. The consequences have play no part in this charge. They shouldn't be even considered. As a result, magistrates are often not even aware that someone has been killed or injured.
Why is it that most drivers who kill are being charged with careless driving?
Well, I can only tell you that on the evidence that's presented to us, looking at these cases, the evidence that's revealed from the investigation, that tends to show careless driving, driving without due care and attention, more often than it shows dangerous driving.
I think as society's attitudes change, we'll have to look again at those guidelines in order to ensure that we are, the criminal justice system is responsive to the wishes of the public.
Because the law is blind to the consequences of careless driving, many families are bewildered by the level of fine imposed. Rob Baird, a 20-year-old student, was killed on the A4 in London. He was in the back seat of a friend's car when the driver pulled out into oncoming traffic.
I call it an accident because that's what everybody seems to call it. In effect, it was a crash. And the effects of the crash was that my son was tossed about in the back of the car and his head received very, very serious damages.
At the magistrates' court, the driver admitted he was guilty of careless driving. But the Bairds were stunned by the punishment.
What we're saying, as far as we are concerned, is the state has valued my son's life for £50. Now, in the same week, I was fined at a magistrates' court £60 for the non-payment of a parking ticket illegally issued by Hertfordshire Police. And when people say, do I have a sense of injustice? Yes, I do.
It is completely incredible. Someone has been killed through someone's negligence, through someone's action, and then the death is treated as if, well, people say as if a hedgehog was killed, or a dog, even less than that. It's absolutely unacceptable.
The Crown Prosecution Service and Association of Chief Police Officers classify offences not by their consequences, but according to the driver's degree of recklessness. Deaths following police chases or joyriding will normally be considered dangerous driving. But accidents caused by falling asleep at the wheel, like this driver, speeding, and jumping a red light, count as careless.
The average penalty for careless driving is probably in the region of £250. It's extraordinarily low. The charge doesn't reflect the severity of the offence. It's inappropriate to define someone as being careless when they're in charge of a potential killing machine such as a car.
The RAC supports calls to review the law, but it warns that juries made up of motorists are often unwilling to convict if the potential sentence is too high.
It's a moral dilemma, but many people convicted of driving offences, their intention was not to kill someone. They have done something wrong, they've broken the law, but the intention wasn't there. The problem in the past was that if you brought in a heavier level of punishment, if you tried to bring charges of manslaughter or murder, the charges just didn't stick. The juries thought, you know, there go I, but for the will of God, and therefore they dropped the charges, so more people actually got off.
Even when someone is killed, the Crown Prosecution Service is often prepared to accept a guilty plea to the far lower offence of careless driving, rather than risk losing a dangerous driving conviction.
If a person pleads guilty to a lesser charge, then very often that case is taken on that charge, and that results in the type of penalties that do cause distress to relatives.
Are you happy with that?
I'm not particularly happy with that. I think that it doesn't take into account the relative's position and the feeling of loss and grief that they have to come to terms with. And I don't think it sends the right message to the motoring public who read about what can, on the face of it, seem very lenient sentences.
Critics argue that the Crown Prosecution Service should always bring the most serious charge possible and then let a jury decide the merits of a case. But bereaved relatives say they often have to fight to get the maximum charge brought to court. 6 people were left dead after a lorry with defective brakes ran out of control in the Yorkshire town of Sowerby Bridge. It took 4 years and a battle with the Crown Prosecution Service before the victims' families managed to get a manslaughter case brought against the firm's directors.
Pete worked for British Telecom. He went to work on his push bike so that I could have the car for the children. And he was just going to where he was supposed to be working, which was up Chule Lane. Unfortunately, he stopped for the crossings lady to let the people cross the road, which is typical of Pete, and as a result of which the lorry went into him and he was killed.
The driver, who was seen pumping at his brakes before the crash, had been unable to stop a 38-ton lorry. An inquest concluded that the haulage firm were grossly negligent and had failed to maintain their lorries and keep the brakes in good working order. The coroner returned a verdict of unlawful killing.
As a result of that verdict being reached, it's now my intention to have further discussions with the Crown Prosecution Service to assess the most suitable way forward.
But it turned out the company was only charged with defective brakes. And to me, that was appalling. They were fined £5,000, which was the maximum. But £5,000 for the loss of 6 lives. It cheapens lives. It means that each life is worth less than £1,000.
Despite the unlawful killing verdict of the coroner's court, the Crown Prosecution Service refused to bring a corporate manslaughter charge.
That surely is wrong when 6 people have lost their lives. That level...
The victims' relatives campaigned against that decision, eventually appealing to the High Court.
The Crown Prosecution Service originally decided not to bring any charges other than driving with defective brakes. On behalf of the families of the victims, I was involved as the barrister who took a judicial review of that decision. And when we got to the High Court, 2 senior High Court judges made it plain that they felt that the case merited a manslaughter prosecution.
All I wanted was justice. And up to that point I hadn't had it.
But the manslaughter charge was never tried. It took 4 years to bring the case to court. By this time, 2 key expert witnesses were too ill to give evidence. The brakes had earlier been returned to the company, who, thinking that legal proceedings were over, had them destroyed. The prosecution could not now bring enough evidence to support a conviction, so the judge threw the case out.
In effect, what the judge was saying is that because the Crown Prosecution Service didn't act appropriately at the outset and didn't bring the correct charge at the outset, a fair trial was not possible. And as a result of that, there was an acquittal of the director who was charged with manslaughter.
It didn't come to a natural conclusion. If it had gone before the jury and the jury had found him not guilty, then I personally would have felt I've had my day in court. The jury have heard everything and they have come to a decision. But as it was, the case was thrown out and the jury was instructed to bring in a not guilty verdict.
We're currently doing 104 miles an hour in which to catch him up. And this guy, the same guy, it could be a female driving, has actually overtaken a fully liveried police Range Rover with police written on it, blue lights on and everything. So he's doing 92 miles an hour with a pillion passenger.
In Lancashire, they've just introduced a new Get Tough policy to tackle irresponsible drivers. Every division has been given specific targets to reduce road deaths and injury in their patch. All 3,000 Lancashire officers, not just specialist patrols, have been told to enforce traffic laws as a priority.
It could be quite interesting, this, with every goods vehicle on the offside. Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Oh,
Oh yes. Last minute, straight in.
And how did we know he was going to do that?
We need to ensure, if we are saying to the public on the one hand that you must not speed, we need to ensure that the penalties that accrue from breaching that message are sufficient to support the education, the re-education of the public that needs to take place.
We're now doing 98 miles an hour. And we're just painting him at the moment.
I'm now doing 84 miles an hour in a mandatory 50 in roadworks. 82 miles an hour. We've got the sign saying 50 miles an hour, so he knows he's in a 50 mile an hour zone. We're now out of that, out of the roadworks, back onto the normal carriageway. And we're now up to 90 miles an hour. So it's time to say hello, I think.
Excessive speed is the biggest cause of death on our roads. But many drivers see speed limits as an unnecessary hindrance, with speed traps and cameras as something to be dodged.
Just late.
The point of the law is to enhance road safety, or it should be. The way it's being handled and enforced at the moment, frankly, isn't helping road safety. We believe it's hindering it.
Why?
Because a driver who's forced to drive at an inappropriately low speed to the conditions is unlikely to be paying attention. You know, he's unlikely to be learning how to cope with hazards and to spot them and to handle them appropriately.
The Association of British Drivers runs an internet site which gives details of speed cameras and unmarked patrol cars.
The authorities claim that speed cameras are located in accident black spots. So we would argue that all we're doing is advising them of where the accident black spots are. If, as we strongly assert...
Clearly, you're not providing a list of accident black spots where you're advising people to go slowly. You're trying to help speeders avoid being penalised.
We're trying to help people to know where hazards on the road are, and we believe speed cameras are hazards.
The public need us to take a lead. I want to see the police service take a lead in changing those attitudes. And if that means more rigorous enforcement, then so be it.
If you want to tell the driving instructor this afternoon what happened to get you here, well, that's up to you, but you don't have to.
In Lancashire, the police want to educate as well as penalise traffic offenders. In a new scheme, careless drivers are offered an alternative to going to court. Instead, they can pay £100 for advanced driving lessons, designed to correct their bad habits.
Again, we know what the speed limit is on here, don't we?
Yes.
What is it? 40. It's actually... have another guess. 30. It's actually 30.
If you go to court, they give you a fine, you pay your fine off the points on your licence, no more said about it, you can go out and do it again. But on the course, they make you realise what you've done, your mistakes, and help you not to do them again. Look for the hazards. Today, when I've been driving, I've found very many points with my driving that are wrong, and I've been advised how to correct them.
The government says it wants motorists to kill their speed. But figures from the Association of Chief Police Officers show that nationally, the number of dedicated traffic officers has suffered a recent sharp decline. Some forces have lost nearly a quarter of the police officers in their traffic units.
I'm afraid in some areas of the country, technology seems to have taken over, and we've got cameras everywhere, and that seems to have been a slight excuse for taking the cops off the beat. And I think we need both. We need the cameras and the accident black spots. But what cameras can't do, they can't detect dangerous driving. That's what the police can do. And it's often dangerous driving combined with speeding that causes deaths and injuries on our roads.
It was a lovely day, wasn't it?
The Wickenden family want both better enforcement and stricter penalties. The man who killed their daughter was a repeat offender. He'd been in court before, but was only judged a careless driver. The punishment didn't make him change his ways. They believe if he had, their daughter would still be alive.
Julia was a very, very quiet person, but underneath her quietness, she was a very bubbly girl who loved life, she loved people, and she seemed to leave an impression with everyone she met. She went to university and seemed to blossom.
But her promising career was cut short by a speeding motorist.
My friend that I was with was driving at the time, and he looked in the rearview mirror and realised the car that was approaching us was going at a ridiculous speed. We tried to overtake the car in front of us on the right. It was going too fast to do that, so it overtook on the left for some reason. It hit the cyclist, who just spun in the air. She had no chance at all.
We discovered that he'd been banned from driving this numerous times and still continued doing the same sort of things. His behaviour hadn't changed.
The truth was the driver who killed Julia Wickenden had been disqualified from driving 15 times. He'd never held a licence. He'd also killed before.
The driver ran out, he ran up the side street, and he was saying things like, "I've done it again." He was, at one time, he was even sitting, reaching, wanting to be sick, and he said, "I've done it this time, I've killed someone else."
6 years earlier, in a stolen car, he killed a 78-year-old woman. In court, he admitted stealing the car, breaking the speed limit and failing to stop after the accident, but was only fined £250 for careless driving, banned for 2 years, and given 12 months probation.
Well, I was totally horrified. The fact that the system could let someone go on doing all these things and not really take any sort of action about it. I mean, this was a situation that was awaiting to arise at some point for someone, and it happened.
We have to operate in accordance with the law as it is, and the evidence that we have. But I can obviously sympathise with the families faced with this terrible situation.
Nevertheless, you're looking at possible changes.
Well, it's not for me, and you appreciate it's not for the Crown Prosecution Service to set the law. That is done by Parliament, as advised by the departments.
Bereaved relatives and road safety campaigners want a review of the penalties that follow a death on the road. Previous changes in the law have not increased the number of killer drivers charged with the more serious offence of causing death through dangerous driving. No promises have been made, but as part of a general review of road safety, the government say they will re-examine the charge of careless driving.
In the case of my son's death, what the state has done is to fine that driver £50 plus 3 points. Is that the value of my son's life?
Part of the healing process for parents like myself and many others is feeling that the offender has been dealt with in an adequate way as far as the law is concerned, whereas at the moment the law doesn't recognise a human life has been lost through careless driving.